The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and always it's my honor and pleasure to be with you here again tonight. I'm always so excited. We have a brand new episode. And you know, one thing I love about the show, we're coming on to our, I'm trying to think, sixth year, maybe? In January, we'll be starting our sixth year, I think. Oh my gosh, is that possible? I'll have to double check. I think that's true. Oh my gosh. Anyway, what's always fascinating to me is the most amazing places I meet people and meet the most amazing people. And recently, I was taking a class on learning about public speaking and to be more humorous. And I just thought, it was a fun class. It was a great class. And I met the most amazing people there. And one of the people I met is Dr. Elizabeth Markle. And she is a co-founder of Open Source Wellness. And this is such a cool idea. I'm going to have her explain it to you better than I can, but they call it a behavioral pharmacy. And so I want to get right into this because it's such a cool idea. I just can't wait till it really just goes, I'll say, viral. Anyway, welcome, Dr. Elizabeth. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Sharon. So good to meet you too, and glad to have a chance to share about our work.
Absolutely. Now, when I went online and I saw the video about your community and open source wellness, what was your inspiration for it? Because it's just awesome.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind. Well, so I have different stories to tell about the inspiration. One of them is professional and one's personal. So I'll tell one and then maybe we pause. So I'm a psychologist by training. It means I went to grad school forever and ever, and I worked in integrated primary care behavioral health, which is a really long way of saying that I brought mental health right into the healthcare setting in hospitals and in clinics, and supported patients, but also supported healthcare providers. And during my time working in these big settings, from the VA to tiny federally qualified health centers, I started paying attention to what I now call behavioral prescriptions. And back then, I just called them things that doctors tell their patients to do, right?
Right, but we rarely do.
Yeah, I know, right?
Or we don't do it correctly or whatever.
Right, that we feel guilty about. So I started keeping track of what doctors were telling patients to do. And here's what I found. Regardless of the provider's identity, whether they're primary care or specialist or behavioral health or case management, and regardless of the patient's diagnoses, whether they had diabetes or hypertension or depression or an autoimmune condition, that the providers are giving most of their patients the same 4 behavioral prescriptions. And Sharon, you could guess these. They are, number 1, you should exercise more. Number 2, you need to eat better. Number 3, reduce your stress. That's my favorite. And number 4, you need some meaningful social support or some connection in your life. And then, right? It's like, do these 4 things. And then here's the part that made me and my co-founder, Dr. Ben Emmert Aronson, absolutely crazy, is that doctors would deliver these prescriptions and then they'd say something that sounded like, good luck with that. I'll see you in 6 months. Take care now. And Ben and I said, wait a minute, when we prescribe antibiotics or insulin or antidepressants, it would be malpractice to say, I'm sure you'll find them somewhere, take care now, right? We say, it'll be ready at your preferred pharmacy that's on every corner. Your insurance will pay for it. It'll be dosed specifically for you. And a pharmacist will make sure that you don't just talk about the medicine, but you actually know how to take it. So all this is a wind-up for that. As a nation, we have this incredible delivery system for prescriptions of medication. It's called the pharmacy system, and it's pretty democratized, meaning it works pretty well whether you have a lot of privilege or you don't. Everybody walks into the same CVS. But for behavioral prescriptions, for the human practices and the social experiences that, by the way, actually underlie health and well-being, right? The best treatment, management, cure, prevention of most chronic conditions is, in fact, behavioral. It's nothing. It's a prescription to nowhere. And it becomes a privilege issue because those who can afford Whole Foods and hire a health coach and join a fancy gym and all of those things have a shot. And those who don't, they don't. And we see them in our emergency rooms over and over again while their chronic conditions worsen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. can I get a little bit dark here with how this goes? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. The thing is that, doctors tell these patients what to do, and then patients leave. But instead of going to a world where they can shop at Whole Foods and hire a health coach and spend, 6 hours a day attending to their health, they go back to their worlds that involve multiple part-time jobs and neighborhoods that are not safe to exercise in, and lack of full-service grocery stores, and no affordable childcare, and all of those things. And so they predictably fail to enact the behavioral prescriptions that we so glibly send them off with. And the real tragedy here is that when patients fail, they feel shame. They feel like it's their fault. They don't come back to us and say, hey, doc, your behavioral prescriptions are crap because the social conditions surrounding my life make it impossible for me to really take these on. They say, I'm sorry, doc, I didn't have enough willpower. And that, I think, is the tragedy of the whole thing, that we're actually compounding the problem by generating shame, which leads to resignation and hopelessness, which leads to despair. And I'm sure this is not a surprise to you, having supported thousands of friends and patients and community members who are perhaps experiencing these very things. So, my co-founder and I say, we all get into this saying we're going to do no harm, right? We're going to heal people. But I'm not convinced that delivering behavioral prescriptions with no pharmacy, putting patients in a position where they are unable to be compliant or treatment adherent, that leads to shame and despair, I'm not convinced that does no harm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And the lack of resources for sure. And I also take that, even expand that. Sometimes it's not lack of resources. Sometimes it's I'll say a lack of knowledge, probably maybe combined with a lack of knowledge, because when I was first told, change your diet, and the very kind doctor who told me that, yet had no knowledge in what to change or how to change it, or give me guidance on who to find. And so it was a search on my own to find the proper nutritionist dietitian who explained to me, in my own mind, I had been eating salads, and I had been trying to buy organic and go to the farmer's market. I'm blessed in that area where we do have not a food desert where I live. Yet in my own mind, I thought I was eating healthy. And then come to find out that, well, no, take a look at the salad dressing, take a look at this, take a look at the amount of starches you're eating. A number of things that didn't come down to lack of resources, which is extremely sad and really needs to be something that needs to be done about. But expanding it just to a lack of understanding of knowledge, that the medical professionals at least guide us to the right resources once they say, exercise more. But I'm so fatigued, how can I exercise? Or, gosh, I am eating well. And then that you explain that you make a salad for lunch or something. Oh, that sounds healthy. And off you go out the door. So it also ended in shame when things weren't getting better, even though I was blessed and had a lot of resources.
Yeah. That question of information is really an important one. And I hear you pointing to the instances where really specific information is needed, right? Where just eat better is not good enough. And at Open Source Wellness, we also have a belief that just information is not enough. That giving someone a handout or even an app or a website and saying, here's what you should do, good luck with that, doesn't always lead to sustained transformation. And this is really where the idea of the behavioral pharmacy came from. We said, when we create this, Ben and I both left clinical practice to found Open Source Wellness. And we said, we are going to create something that is experiential, meaning we don't tell people what to do, we do it together in community. So at Open Source Wellness, we deliver one universal prescription, which is abbreviated simply MOVE, Nourish, Connect, Be. So physical activity, healthy meals, social connection, and stress reduction. And we do it together in community. So rather than individuals getting prescriptions and then sort of off on their own to manifest it in their lives, they join us for 16 weeks and we do it together. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. It does. And the video on your website explains it so well. And I see the people all having a good time. They're doing different exercises and other events. And I could see how that could lead to absolute creating better success stories. Because number one, there's always something about similar to the show where shared knowledge, shared successes, shared maybe that isn't so successful over there. Try this. And absolutely being able to have a deeper source of knowledge than sort of that good luck with that, because I know you deal with a wide variety there at Open Source Wellness, not just autoimmune, but a wide variety of both physical and mental health conditions, which is awesome. And from my experience of what the autoimmune world is, it can be quite isolating. A lot of times we're so fatigued or something else is going on, or maybe there's some sort of skin rash or some other thing. We're just like, I don't want to be seen. And it can be quite limiting. And that's what I enjoyed about learning more from you and your website about open source was the welcoming community. I thought, what a beautiful way to encourage everyone to heal in a very non-threatening, non-biased way.
Yeah, I think the nature of suffering, in fact, is that it often predisposes us to isolation, whether it's an autoimmune condition or depression or social anxiety or almost any condition. The impulse can be to sort of withdraw and protect and go inside. And unfortunately, there can be a little bit of a spiral where I don't feel well, so I don't do the things that I enjoy, and then I feel worse, and then I really don't want to go out, right? It's sort of a well-known pattern. And so one of our coaches, I should say, at Open Source Wellness, we don't provide medical care. We don't have doctors. We don't have therapists. We have health coaches and peer leaders. So we're really, really saying, a lot of what we're doing together is not rocket science, right? Move, nourish, connect, be. We can do this at the level of the community. But anyway, one of my coaches recently said to me, Open Source Wellness is like a starter engine for human vitality, or a life force starter engine. And I loved that because it points to the fact that when we find a way out of isolation into community and we feel the uplift of hope and belonging and a sense of being cared for and having some others to care for, right? A sense of being woven into community. There's a certain activation that can happen for our patients, our participants, such that in addition to addressing their health challenges and going after the goals that matter to them, they start taking on things in their lives. And here's the example that stands out to me. At the end of the night, all of our participants write their own prescription. So doctors don't write prescriptions for us, coaches don't write prescriptions, the patients write their own prescriptions. And often they set goals around things like physical activity or their food or reaching out to an old friend or practicing mindfulness. But recently, participants have started saying things like, I'm going to floss my teeth every day this week, or I'm going to deal with my credit card debt. And at first we were kind of mystified. We said, is anybody coaching on dental hygiene or finances? And they all said no. And we just got clear that when we generate some activation, or when some vitality gets activated, people find the wherewithal and the power within to address the things that matter broadly in their lives. And that gives me hope, right? Whether we get someone to full cure or remission or not, the fact that they're living lives that are more meaningful, more high vitality, more rewarding, that matters to me.
That's beautiful. And one thing we say here at the Autoimmune Hour is oftentimes doctors will, I remember when I was told I was in remission and I wagged at my finger, they wagged their finger at me saying, now you're not cured. I went, well, thank you for that implant.
Yeah.
that little worm in my head, clear that. And we talk here about optimizing every single day, choosing one thing to optimize, whatever it is, big or small. Maybe it's just taking a few deep breaths. That's, bravo. If that's what your optimization for the day is, bravo. one thing we found, though, and I'm sure this is how it works there, is it tends to grow. So one small step, and then the next day, another small optimization is added on top. And by the miracle of compounding, instead of just 365 over the year, little optimizations, as you know, and I'm sure you see there at Open Source, it just expands exponentially, because as you begin to feel more connected, more nourished, healthier, breathing deeper, whatever it is, it begins to change. And I found this fascinating on the Courage Club community, begins to change our confidence level.
Mm-hmm.
That we are not a victim to whatever is going on in our world right now, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that we can absolutely begin to optimize in just one little space, and it will grow and grow and grow. And that's what I love about that. And that's why I felt so connected when we started talking in our other class about open source wellness. We need to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to learn some more about open source wellness and how they do it and how you can do it in your own world. So we'll be right back. And tonight we're here with Dr. Elizabeth Markle, and she is the co-founder of Open Source Wellness down in Oakland, California, and they call it a behavioral pharmacy. And as you've been learning, how it's all about getting us to do those quote unquote prescriptions that your doctor will just lay on you and say, good luck with that, such as eat better, get more sleep, stress reduction, exercise more, those things like that. And you're like, sounds good. Now, how do I do it? Open Source Wellness is that place that's putting that into practice. And I got so carried away there in the first part of the show about open source wellness. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan. Elizabeth, share your personal story, if you will, for us, so we know what's the personal motivation behind it.
Yeah, happy to share this. I realize I don't often share this when I'm speaking about open source wellness. So here's the personal story. Since I was 19, I've lived in community. Now, if you're thinking like commune, spiritual guru, woo-woo, it's not quite like that. But I have lived in what we call intentional community. So there's a thing called co-housing, where individuals have their own homes or families have their own homes, but that the broader community of 30 or 40 families has some shared space as well. So a big common house with a big commercial kitchen and laundry room and yoga room and things like that. So there's a balance between private space and public or shared space that really is designed to facilitate community. And currently I live in a small community with 8 people. And just so that you know, the way it works for me is that I cook dinner twice a month. So 2 times a month, I come home and I spend like 3 hours, right? I buy healthy produce and I cook a whole meal, and I have to deal with everybody's dietary preferences, and I clean up after it. And it's a big deal. But the other, 24 nights of the month, I come home from work and dinner is made for me, and it's healthy and plant-based and wonderful, and cleanup is handled. Every morning at about 7:45 in my house, people gather for about 15 minutes of silent reflection time. Some people meditate, some people journal, and after that, we just do like 1-minute check-ins with each other, just sharing a little bit about our day, how we're doing. And, if I say, okay, guys, I really need to exercise every day this week, who's with me? I know someone will say, okay, I'm in, let's do this. Or I'll text you and make sure you actually got out of bed. So I say all this not because I think everybody should live in community. I don't. It's a total pain in the ass, right? Like we have to have meetings about what kind of peanut butter we're going to buy. Seriously. But here's why I share this story. It's because the basic building blocks of well-being are built into the social structures surrounding our lives, right? Healthy food, physical activity, social connection, stress reduction. I'm living well, not because I have wealth, because I don't, and not because I have willpower, because I don't particularly, but because these basic practices are baked into the structures of my life. And that was really a big part of the inspiration for our founding Open Source Wellness. It was getting the sense, okay, living in community is not culturally or financially of interest to many people, but we do know a lot about how to use social design to make being happy and healthy and well the default rather than the result of privilege or extraordinary effort. And so our our commitment was to bring that to the healthcare system, to say, how can we leverage the power of community to generate the medicine, not in one-time doses, but in daily practices that underlie human health and well-being. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's beautiful. And it reminds me of the research I've been reading over the last year or so about connection, community, and loneliness, and how that plays into so many things, from addiction to people not getting well, when by all sorts of, like on the paperwork, they should be getting well. And they found really deep connections about loneliness and not being well. And I think that's an awesome idea that if, as you said, that your community style isn't for everyone, but making us a place where people can come and find it and have it accessible. How awesome is that?
Yeah, I mean, the research that I read most recently says that being lonely or socially isolated is about equivalent in morbidity and mortality to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So I think
Wow.
It's high time that this is being paid attention to, and that when healthcare is prescribing, that we are giving not only the technical fix, but also the means to make that technical fix effective.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, this idea of loneliness too, as I think about more and more families live further and further away. They are disconnected via all sorts of things, and having this social construct that people can come to is just wonderful. What are some of the things that you prescribe that people could do at home, that you say, okay, yes, we don't have that, but here are some of the things that our participants have found to be quite successful in creating wellness for them?
Yeah, sure. Well, just going back for a moment to your reflection on people living far away from their families, absolutely. People ask me all the time, why is it called open source wellness? Why the name? You know, it's not a tech product. Why is that? And we say, you know, first of all, there's nothing rocket science about move, nourish, connect, be, right? You don't need to be a doctor. You don't need to have a specialized degree in order to uplift these things in your lives. And it's my sense, although I'm not an anthropologist, that successful societies over time have found a way to bake those four things in, such that physical activity, healthy meals, stress reduction, social connection were, again, woven into the fabric of society. I imagine a world in which we are in a national conversation about those four things: move, nourish, connect, be. And that individuals at the beginning of their day or at the end of their day are saying to themselves, okay, how am I going to get those four in? So that's one suggestion I would have for individuals, is at the beginning of your day or towards the end of your day, ask yourself, have I done all four of those? Have I moved my body in some way? Have I nourished my body? Have I found some way to be at peace, to manage stress and reactivity? And have I had some meaningful connection, whether it's actually seeing a friend or just sending a text, making meaningful contact? Imagine that families over the dinner table asked each other that, and educated children from young ages about caring for themselves and each other in that way. Imagine that families said, okay, what do we need to do tonight? Should we take a walk? Should we play games with each other? You know, should we pack lunches for tomorrow? What would be uplifting our well-being? And imagine then a national conversation about this. Like, imagine if our clinical healthcare structures and the social structures around our lives were set up to potentiate these four. We have gotten really curious about schools. So think about schools are these beautiful buildings that have big commercial kitchens, gym space, a dining room, right? There's lots and lots of beautiful space in schools. What if at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., when schools normally go dark, if they were animated as centers for community well-being, and there was a healthy meal and physical activity and stress reduction and conversation and spaces for kids to play? Imagine if we could sort of take over community spaces and make them platforms for human thriving. So I always encourage people, yes, to pay attention to their own big four, as we call them. What have I done? What do I need? And then how can I be the source of that for the people around me?
Platforms for human thriving. I love that. Oh my gosh, that just gives me chills. Oh wow, that is so amazing. Now, one of the things that we talk about, and I think people always, I say, slightly recoil from, is the idea of goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
Share with us some of the tips that you've learned that make it easier, less less scary, shall I say?
Yeah. Well, we help people have North Star goals and first steps, right? So yes, we name the big North Star, right? I want to be pain-free. I want to reverse my diabetes. I want to have no depression. And we say, great, we are all in for North Star goals. And then what we actually coach around, having identified that, is, what is the first step? What are you going to do tonight? What are you going to do tomorrow? And then our coaches are in contact with people throughout the week via text and phone going, okay, how did your first step go? Where did you get stuck? Where did you get stopped? Let's see if we can help you with that. The other thing that I would say is, I can sort of act this out. We ask people a lot, like, what is it that you really want, right? We say, when they first show up, we say, why are you here? What do you want? And they say, well, my doctor told me I should lose weight. And our coach will say, okay, that's cool. And what do you want? Not what your doctor wants, but what do you want? And they will think about it and they'll say, well, yeah, I'd like to lose weight. And our coaches will say, well, great. Okay. And then what would you have? What would be available to you? What would your life be like if you lost weight? Like, why do you want to lose weight? And this usually makes people pause because they're not used to being asked at that deep of a level what it is they really want. And after a long moment, they'll say something like, what I actually want is to be able to play with my grandkids, right? I can't keep up with them right now. I have a lot of pain. I'm exhausted. And what matters to me is being around and able to participate in their lives. And our coaches will go, great. That is fuel for transformation. So one of the quotes that we love is, it goes, desire is the only power source potent enough to affect change. Quoting a former teacher of mine, desire is the only power source potent enough to affect change. What doesn't work is guilt and fear and shame and your doctor being mad at you and your partner being mad at you. If any of these things worked, we wouldn't need to exist. But we work really hard to source people's desire for that which really, really matters in their lives, and then to sort of tap into that as a fuel source to help people move through the daily steps, the baby steps that get them towards that North Star. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's beautiful. And as you were mentioning that, it really brought me back to one of the basic tenets of nonviolent communication, about being able to discern the difference between yourself or someone else's wants and needs, and being able to know that there is a difference between the two, and that you can get change from either place. It's just knowing, is this a want? And as you said, that's more of a desire place versus a need. And sometimes needs can feel forced, or I don't want to go, or people are hanging on to the now because it's good enough, and maybe they're scary over there. And let's talk about that idea of, sometimes I know, even in my wellness journey, there have been places where I've just, okay, I'm just really tired of all of this. I'm going to stay here in this quote unquote good enough place for a while, which I know isn't probably the best thing, but sometimes I just need to stay in that good enough place for a while to recharge. But what happens when we get to that place where we say, okay, I'm sure it could be better, but it's certainly better than it was, so I'm going to stay stuck here in good enough?
That question of what's good enough, it varies from your point of view, right? So what an individual feels is good enough might be different from what their coach feels is good enough, might be different from what their doctor thinks is good enough. And we really work with participants around what it is that they need and want, and what the right size steps are for them. So I think people need to be deeply heard, gotten, accepted, validated, seen, cared for, loved exactly as they are before you lay an expectation on them of change or transformation or hard work. And Carl Rogers used to talk about unconditional positive regard. And I don't use that language with our coaches, but we hire coaches who, through their own personal experience, have cultivated deep reverential kindness in them for the human experience. We don't hire for technical health knowledge or being in perfect health oneself. We hire people who are extraordinary human beings. And I think that means finding a way to love people in whatever state they are in. And sometimes that is resigned, angry, hopeless, exhausted. And I think we need to love people there before there's any expectation. So I think loving people where they are and then making invitations, gentle invitations that don't sound like, you should do this, but sound like, hey, do you want to join us trying this? Let's see if we can make this fun and socially rewarding and connectable. So that's the approach that we take.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it got me reflecting on some of my favorite team members in my wellness journey here.
Mm.
And yes, I've collected a team. I find it takes a team to do that, but to keep this journey moving forward are the ones that have been there, whether it is through an autoimmune or some other change in their life that really brought them to a point where they had to make some internal modifications and adjustments, that they were able to maybe not exactly be in my shoes, because that's tough, but understand what it was like because they had been on a similar road. And I think that's important for people to understand. And we had Elizabeth Kipp on the other day, and she was talking about chronic pain, but I see that it fits here as well. And her first comment about getting through chronic pain that she learned was not to judge the pain. And I'm feeling like I want to say not to judge the condition, not to judge the circumstance, not to judge the place. And I think that's my personal lesson I see that the universe keeps bringing to me for the past bit of time here is being in that place of breathe through what's ever happening in the moment and not be in that place of any sort of laying a judgment on it, whether it's personal or external.
Yeah, so beautiful. At Open Source Wellness, every weekly meeting, so just for context, participants are with us for 2 hours every week for 16 weeks. That's like an initial dose. And at every 2-hour chunk, we do about 20 minutes of physical activity. We do about 5 minutes of some sort of stress reduction. We have a meal together. And there's what we call a spark, which is a 10 or 15 minute experiential learning. It's not a lecture or a lesson exactly, but it's an experience. And we have a beautiful coach whose focus is on nutrition, and she designed a lesson called One Body, One Life. And the idea is to take a moment to air all of our complaints about our bodies, right? It doesn't do this, it should do this, it hurts, it doesn't look the way I want it to. Oh my goodness, we all have a litany of what our upsets are, and to make space for that. And then to take a moment and turn towards actually recognizing the miracle of our bodies, all the things that it does moment in, moment out to regulate, to allow us to move through the world. And that, truly we get one body in this life. And if we spend much of our time hating it, we create a lot of extra suffering. So both to bring acceptance and gratitude to our bodies, and to inspire us to care as well as we possibly can for this one body in this one life. It's a beautiful lesson, and it's an example of the way that we don't deliver classic health curriculum, but we create experiences that help people encounter their health in a different way.
Wow. I love that. And I blew past that commercial break. We need to take a quick commercial break. And tonight we're here with Elizabeth Markle, and she is the co-founder of Open Source Wellness. It's a behavioral pharmacy, and we've been talking about what all that is. And I am just a huge fan of the concept and the way that it can create amazing change for people. She's also a licensed psychologist, researcher, and assistant professor of community mental health in California Institute of Integral Studies. And I could go on and on. She has an amazing bio here, but I want to get down in just our last 13 minutes here. Lucky 13, Elizabeth. What other tips can you share that our audience can take away and implement today?
Great. Okay. Well, I think I sort of shared my number one, which is see if you can get some dose or micro dose of move, nourish, connect, and be in your life every single day. And I would encourage folks to do even the ones that don't seem immediately appropriate to their particular challenges. And I say this because we have people who come to us who say, I'm struggling with anxiety or depression, but physical activity doesn't have anything to do with that, or nutrition, it's not about that. And we also have people who say, I'm struggling with obesity, or I'm struggling with a chronic condition, but meditation and socializing doesn't have anything to do with that. And what we find is that when people engage with all four of these pillars, there's a synergy, right? Physical activity generates positive mood and activation in a way that's just as good of a treatment for depression as it is for something else, and vice versa. Those who just came from mental health found that the connection and the eating a meal together with other human beings is actually just as good for them as the cognitive behavioral work that they're doing. So I would say find whatever way you can to move your body, eat something nourishing, have a quiet moment with yourself, and connect with another human being every single day if you can. And my tip around connection is perhaps paradoxical. I think we sometimes are not sure about what creates intimacy, what the experience of meaningful connection or authentic relating, what I suggest to our participants is to find some small way to tell another human being the truth about what you're experiencing. That a feeling of being seen and received and connected starts with honesty. Whether it's like, I'm having a hard day, I have a lot of pain, and I didn't even want to reach out to you, but I am. This is what's real for me today. Or, I'm feeling hopeful today, and here's what I'm getting excited about in my life. Find some way to tell the truth about what's happening for you, and invite other people to do the same. It's not just like, hey, how are you? It's like, hey, really, like, I want to know, how's your world? What's happening in there? And finding just some way to express your interest, your desire to be connected beyond the surface can create magic in relationships that we just didn't see as previously available. So that would be my recommendation.
Wow, I love the recommendation. And I almost hear in the background, that takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and authentic and show up transparent.
Yeah, it does. And the beauty of it, though, is that it creates permission for other human beings to do the same, right? Because we're all waiting for someone else to say it's okay, to say I care, to say I want to know, to say I'm suffering too, right? To say I don't have it all together either. So it's not just for you. It's a fundamentally generous, generative, pro-social thing to do, to tell the truth, to de-shame or to de-risk honesty or authenticity or realness with another human being. It's paying it forward in a way. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's beautiful, because I think of my closest girlfriends that I've had for 45 years, dating myself here. We know everything about each other, everything. And those are the ones that I know I can call anytime, day or night. And how powerful that has been through my healing journey, not just through the autoimmune diagnosis, but through, I consider this a healing journey on just not the physical, but the mental, emotional, spiritual. Our whole life is a healing journey. So anyway, it's powerful to have those types of friends in our world and to cultivate them. I just have one quick question before we have to end here. What happens at the end of 16 weeks? I can see that I would be so invigorated and I'd have family, in air quotes, that what happens at the end of 16 weeks?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It does happen. We sometimes say, okay, you're graduating in a few weeks, and people say, what? Like, this is what I do. You can't graduate me out of this. So yeah, there are three choices. Some folks do choose to complete at 16 weeks. Some apply to be peer leaders, and they then come back and serve as mentors or assistant coaches to the incoming participants. And then something really exciting has happened in the East Bay, so near Oakland, where there's a number of graduates. We've been around for a little while here now. A group of our graduates and peer leaders have formed what they're calling OSWX. So you know how there's TED Talks and TEDx as the independently organized version?
Yes, yeah.
So OSWX is the peer-run version of open source wellness. And these graduates get together twice a month, and they do the exact same things that we've done. So movement, mindfulness, a lesson or a sharing, and then a meal together. And this just gives me all the hope in the world, because we know that as great as any program is, it probably isn't going to sustain the world or the country in health. And so, I recently had a participant say to me, hey, Liz, is this like church for health? And at first I thought, oh God, no, this has nothing to do with religion or church. But again, church is a social structure that you don't graduate from, right? That you continue to engage with because it helps you live a better life. And church doesn't work for a lot of people. But our hope is that, like church or like AA, right? The many 12-step meetings that don't require professional staff, and don't require a lot of funding, but they're a way for individuals and families to come together and live and uplift the practices that make them happy and healthy and well. I would love that, in addition to the clinical professional version of this, that all around the country there are OSWX chapters popping up, making this accessible in the long term.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll hold that vision for you. Absolutely, Elizabeth, because as I said, I'm a fan of open source wellness. That's amazing. Now, we're just down to the last few minutes, and I want you to share the good news. I heard about it. I'm so excited for you. Open source wellness, it's expanding, right?
Yeah, we're growing. It's such an exciting time. We're based in the Bay Area in Oakland. And so we do a lot of work here, both at our community site, and we work in low-income housing communities where there are residents who might have a hard time getting out to other places and other resources. And we do this work embedded in low-income clinics, so federally qualified health centers typically. And part of what's exciting is that we bring our program and our health coaches in to the clinic, run our program on site, while one doctor or nurse practitioner pulls patients aside for individual check-ins. So instead of it being a referral, like, go out and find this in the community, some patients are getting, their provider will say, I'm writing you a prescription, but it's not for a medication. It's for participation in a community, and it happens right here in the clinic. And you're going to get a phone call from a coach who's going to take the time to get to know you and then invite you into a weekly experience. So we are spreading to these clinics here in the Bay, and most recently we launched up in the state of Washington. So we have figured a way to license this model to train people to deliver it, and it's so exciting for us because our vision is that this becomes the standard of care. That at some point we laugh about doctors saying, do this, do that, do this, good luck. Right? That becomes antiquated, that a behavioral pharmacy or a delivery system for the practices that we need to be generating in our lives, that becomes the standard. So we encourage folks to reach out to us wherever you are. If you go to our website, it's opensourcewellness.org. You can always send us a message, whether you're a healthcare professional or someone who's just interested in generating this in your community. Our vision is that this is not a boutique phenomenon, right? We don't need to recreate the boutique wellness industry, which is doing just fine, thank you. Our vision is that this, again, becomes part of the standard of care, so that regardless of level of privilege or sociocultural capital, that the practices that underlie human health and well-being are accessible to all.
That's beautiful. beautiful. Everyone, that's Elizabeth Markle, and she's co-founder of Open Source Wellness, and it's a beautiful model. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your vision to having a happy, healthier future for all, and bringing this important information to us tonight. It's so profound for me. I'm just such a huge fan of Open Source Wellness and you, Elizabeth. So everyone, have a great week, whatever your adventures. Join me next week for another brand new episode.
Thanks, Sherry.
Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio.